Imagine standing on a narrow street in New York City. A small sign on an old red facade. WeWork. No one knows what's behind it yet. No one knows that this idea will one day change millions of lives, and even the idea of work. I want to tell you a story not just about business, but about a dream, about perseverance, about how you can get up after falling and do incredible things, even when everyone says no. This story is about me, about WeWork, and how the courage to change and move forward can work wonders. I started out like many of you, with a small idea, an empty room that smelled of stale coffee and dust, with furniture that seemed haphazardly put together, but I saw potential in it. I wanted to create a place where people didn't just work, but felt like they were part of a community, where ideas were born, where everyone could be themselves. It sounds simple, but at the time, everyone around me was just snickering and asking, who's going to pay for shared offices? The first office that Miguel McKelvey and I rented was tiny. The walls weren't perfectly flat, the light barely filtered through the windows, and I remember thinking, if we can make this place come alive, if people believe in our simple idea, we can change the rules of the game. But no one believed us back then. Investors asked skeptical questions, competitors laughed at us, friends advised us to quit this pointless pursuit. Every day felt like a struggle. I slept for several hours, worked on plans, drawings, trying to imagine how a small room could become the center of a big dream. And in this silence, among the smell of coffee and the creak of old floors, I felt, this is where something more than an office is born. This is where a community is born that will one day unite people all over the world. This was just the beginning, a small step that seemed silly to everyone else. But to me, it was the first step to something huge. And if you're ready, I want to show you how we went from a humble office with furniture from a dumpster to a global company that's changing the way the world looks at work. I remember when we first faced reality, the skepticism of investors, the doubts of friends, the first serious arguments with Miguel. We were sitting in a small conference room, and one of the potential investors, not hiding his contempt, asked, who is going to pay for this? Do people want to share offices? I felt the blood rush to my head. It was scary. It felt like the whole world was against us. Miguel and I argued for hours. He said we were taking too much risk, that it was better to stay small, stable. I stood my ground because I saw a picture that no one else had seen. Living offices, where people meet, exchange ideas, create startups, make friends and grow together. We slept for a few hours, ate on the go. The phone never went silent even at night. Every little thing, every detail of the office mattered to us. There were a few moments when I wanted to give up. When the bank refused to approve the loan, when the furniture didn't arrive in time, when we opened a new space and clients refused to sign contracts. I remember looking at the empty office one evening and thinking, maybe I'm crazy. But that's when I realized, if we don't take a risk now, we'll never know what could have been. Gradually, we started to have small victories. The first startups that rented workspaces came back again and brought friends. People started to notice the atmosphere we created, the aroma of coffee, the open spaces, the light falling on the trees, the feeling of home among the concrete walls of the metropolis. These little things that investors overlooked became our strength. But the crises weren't over. A new big challenge was looming on the horizon, scaling. People started asking if we could really do this globally. I felt like it was now or never. And then an idea was born that changed everything. Not just co-working spaces, but a global platform for people and companies, where everyone could feel like they belonged to something bigger. Gradually, our efforts began to bear fruit. The first WeWork offices, although small, came to life. I remember the moment when the first clients walked in. The smell of coffee mixed with the warm light that filtered through the large windows, and I saw their eyes. The eyes of people who feel that something more is possible here than just work. Some were smiling, some were sitting at a table and quietly discussing their startups. And at that moment I realized, we were on the right track. We felt like a small idea born in a cramped loft was starting to grow into a community. People came not just for work, but for inspiration. They brought friends, and friends brought friends. We held meetings where everyone spoke out loud, and I noticed that it was these open discussions that gave rise to ideas that we would never have had on our own. But even in this moment of joy, we were faced with difficulties. Each new office meant new costs, new contracts, new risks. One of my partners almost refused to participate due to doubts, and the investors continued to ask difficult questions. What if it fails? What if people don't understand your concept? I replied that I couldn't guarantee it, but I knew one thing. If we don't try, we'll never know what we're capable of. The moment of triumph was the day we signed our first big customers. Startups, small teams, companies, everyone wanted to be part of this movement. I remember standing in the room, looking at the people and thinking, we really built something that matters. That was the first proof that our dream was not in vain. And at the same time, I knew this was just the beginning. Small victories gave strength, but even bigger challenges awaited ahead: scaling, competitors, financial risks. I began to dream not of a few offices in New York, but of WeWork, which would unite the world. And this dream, which seemed unattainable at the time, became our next goal. After the first victories, I realized that small offices were just the beginning. We already had a community that people loved, but I saw that more could be done. And then the question arose: are we ready to become a global force? I sat down at a large table in our headquarters, surrounded by partners and investors. The smell of fresh coffee was in the air, but the tension hung like a thick fog. I felt that the future of the company depended on this conversation. I said frankly, we can become the company that changes the way people work around the world. It will be risky, but if we don't do it now, no one will. There were skeptics. Someone said we were crazy, that expanding to Tokyo or London was a waste of money. The team had internal doubts, but I felt this is our chance, and we went for it. We began to actively seek investors to attract billions of dollars for global expansion. I remember the first negotiations with large funds. In one office, there were tense debates. The phones did not fall silent, and I stood and felt that my heart was beating so fast, as if I were about to jump off a cliff without a parachute. But inside there was a conviction. This is our chance to create something huge. A symbolic decision that changed everything. We stopped thinking only about individual premises. WeWork became a platform for communities, for startups, for creative people, wherever they are. We began to build a corporate culture that values people, not just square meters. We learned to listen to customers, respond quickly to their needs, and create spaces where people feel at home, even in a foreign city. And here are the first results. Offices were opening in London, San Francisco, Tokyo. People started telling each other, "You have to see this." Photos of bright spaces, smiling people, coffee smelling throughout the office appeared on social networks. We felt our first real triumph. But at the same time, I understood, this is just the beginning of a global journey, and even greater challenges await us ahead. We opened offices one after another. New York, London, San Francisco, Tokyo. Each opening was a celebration, and I remember standing on stage, looking at the bright, vibrant spaces, and thinking, we really did it. People were applauding, taking photos, hugging, telling each other their success stories. We had created a community that connected people all over the world, and I felt proud and excited at the same time. But along with the triumph, the first signs began to appear that scale is a double-edged sword. Our costs were rising, competitors were watching closely, investors were asking about profitability, and I understood. In order not to break even, you need to keep a balance between the dream and reality. We celebrated big deals, scaling into new countries, attracting hundreds of millions in investment. But every decision became a dramatic choice. One wrong office, one too expensive contract, and everything could have turned into a disaster. I felt an enormous responsibility resting on my shoulders. Despite this, I didn't stop. Every morning the office opened, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the noise of employees, and the laughter of people finding friends and ideas were proof that we were on the right track. Every small victory fueled ambition, gave energy and faith that WeWork could change the world's work culture. But I knew a global breakthrough was only half the battle. The real test lay ahead: financial challenges, internal conflicts, and criticism from all sides. And this is where our story becomes even more dramatic, because big dreams always face big difficulties. The lights of the big stage, the applause, and the celebrations were left behind. New, more daunting challenges lay ahead. We were growing fast, too fast. The costs of rent, office decoration, salaries, all this was skyrocketing. And I felt that the global dream that inspired people could turn into chaos. At a board meeting, in a cold conference room with large windows reflecting the silhouettes of New York City skyscrapers, I saw real fear on people's faces for the first time. Investors began to ask questions that had previously seemed impossible. How can we trust this company to survive? Will it not burn down like it did? It was painful to hear these words. I felt the world we had built could crumble in one day. There were also internal conflicts brewing. The team questioned my decisions. Some partners questioned the pace of expansion and management style. I felt like I was on the edge. Either we would get through this together, or our dream would fall apart. The IPO failure was a real blow. We were preparing to go public, attract huge investments, show the world our potential. But at the last moment, investors saw the risks. The financial forecast turned out to be unstable, and everything collapsed. It was the moment when I realized that a dream can be too expensive if you don't keep a balance between ambition and reality. Then I had to do the hardest thing: leave the position of CEO, hand over the reins of the company to those who could stabilize the situation. It was embarrassing, scary, but I knew this is not the end. I saw how the people we had inspired for years began to restore faith, change approaches, make operations more efficient. My dream remained alive, even though I was no longer at the helm. This crisis has taught me that great ambitions always carry risk, that leadership is not only about winning, but also about letting go. And even when it seems like everything is falling apart, there is the strength within to turn a fall into a new beginning. After the IPO failure and my departure as CEO, the company was on the brink. It was quiet, like after a storm, and every step seemed crucial. The new leader came with a plan, simpler but realistic. We began restructuring, cutting costs, optimizing processes, restoring investor confidence. I watched this process, sometimes with sadness, sometimes with pride. It was difficult to watch someone else take the helm, but at the same time I understood, the idea is stronger than the person, and it is he who must live on. My role changed, from a leader to someone who can give advice, share experiences, and look at what we have created through the eyes of another generation of leaders. And then something unexpected happened. People started coming back. Startups that had once been our first customers were offering partnerships. New investors were interested in WeWork. Even competitors were recognizing our cultural strength. We realized that a company built on community and trust can survive even after a downer. For me, it was a moment of recognition. I spoke openly about mistakes, about the danger of scale without control, about the need to balance ambition with reality. And at the same time, I felt proud. We had created something that would influence the global work culture, something more than just a business. We had left a mark. This part of the journey taught me something important. Culture, community, and values are always stronger than temporary difficulties, and admitting your mistakes is not a weakness, but a strength. And even if you step away from the big stage, your dream can live on, inspire others, and change the world. Today, when I look at WeWork, I see more than just offices. I see the community we've built, the people who inspire each other, the startups that are creating new ideas, and the culture that is changing the way the world works. We've been through some crazy crises, through failures and losses, through laughter and tears. And yet, the company lives, breathes, and thrives.